I've always adhered to just going with your palate, enjoying the wine that you like. So copper cane is our philosophy when it comes to maturity. We want to see the very tips of these canes, which a few months back were green, completely lignified from the base all the way up to the tip. And what that signifies to me is that the grapes and the vines have purged themselves of all the green characters, the underripe notes. We want that completely brown and hardened off, so no green wood. This tells me the resulting wines from these grapes are going to be very showy, very soft, and very supple. And that's exactly what we're looking for in all of our wines. But this beautiful cast of color here, this coppery wood, you'll see throughout the valley during harvest and just after harvest. As soon as the leaves fall, the entire valley floor is a sea of copper. And that is where the name copper cane came from.
Good evening. Welcome to our virtual wine tasting event. My name is Jordan Dubois. I'm with Lowe's Foods, and we are excited to have Copper Cane Wine and Provisions on this virtual tasting with us. We're going to be welcoming Joe Wagner to the broadcast in just a moment. But first, we got a few housekeeping items we're going to go over. We're tasting 3 wines tonight. The first one is the Elouan Chardonnay. Hopefully, you've got a chance to get that chilled already, but if not, quick tip. Throw that in a stock pot or a bucket or something like that. Dump some ice in there and some water. Stir that water around. We'll get that bottle cooled down really quick. So we're going to want to drink that at nice, cool temperature. Then we're going to be following that up with the Boeing Russian River Pinot Noir, followed by the Belle Glos Las Alturas Pinot Noir. And we're going to drink those a little bit chilled as well. So throw those in the fridge now too. And by the time we get to them, they'll be at a good cellar temp, 50, 55 degrees. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Another thing that we want to bring to your attention, this deal on these 3 wines, $75 when you buy all 3, runs through the end of this month. So you still have time to go out and take advantage of this deal again. Any of your local Lowe's food stores can get you hooked up with that. We've still got plenty of product on the shelf, and that deal runs through the end of the month. So don't miss that. And right now, through the end of the day, Tuesday, we're doing our 25% off case sale, which means 12 wines. They can be boxes, bottles, cans, big bottles, little bottles, magnums, mix and match, whichever ones you want, at least 12 in one transaction, 25% off. We usually do 20% off, but sometimes we're feeling festive. So this time we went with 25, which we're very excited about. So through the end of the day, Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, you can take advantage of that deal as well. If you're on our live stream here, we invite you to ask questions throughout the evening. Joe loves taking user questions. You can see the scroll below me. We'll remind you throughout the broadcast. So if you have questions that come up, just drop those in the comments section, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we possibly can. We're going to start with the Elouan Chardonnay in just a moment. We've got a quick video, and then we're going to welcome Joe Wagner in and get this party started. So grab your Elouan, get that bad boy popped. We'll be right back to drink some wine.
For our Elouan Chardonnay, we bring together fruit from 3 premier regions in the foothills of Oregon's coastal range. Each one of them representing something special and unique. But what I love about Chardonnay is its ability to grow and make fantastic wines from a broad array of climates. But what makes Oregon so special is that cool temperature and its array of soil types that add to a ton of diversity and flavor profiles to contribute to this beautiful style of Chardonnay that we've created with Elouan. Our Elouan Chardonnay has a bright and beautiful acidity, yet tones of tropical fruit and an amazing lemon and lime zest. While this is a very crisp Chardonnay, it has a beautiful mouthfeel and it envelops every element of your palate. Because of the balance of the Elouan Chardonnay, it pairs great with a broad array of dishes, from creamy pasta dishes to grilled halibut and even barbecued chicken. So I encourage you to get out there and have some fun with your food and wine pairings with a great wine like Elouan Chardonnay. Cheers and thank you.
Joe, welcome, my friend. Thank you.
Hello, Jordan, and hello to the whole Lowe's community out there. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We're excited, man. Let's start with you telling us a little bit about you, your career, your what got you to this moment, and tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Oh, great. Well, I know you guys got to hear a little bit about Elouan, but I'll talk a little bit about my history and my family's history. Belle Glos is what got it all started for me. Here, the wax dipped bottle that everybody knows about and maybe has struggled with once or twice in their life. Began that in 2001, but we started farming for that in the late 90s. Didn't really know much about Pinot Noir, and I wanted to experiment with it, and eventually were able to create something that I felt reflected the coast of California. And that was the beginning of my career. So here we are 20 years later, making a number of different wines under the Copper Cane portfolio, not looking to be, the biggest out there, but we definitely want to have a good array of wines. But my history didn't start in 2001. I did a lot of work with my dad through the 90s as a teenager, working in the vineyards and in the cellar, getting the ropes, I guess, so to speak, of the wine business. My family immigrated from Alsace back in the 1850s. Which is now a region in France known for great Rieslings predominantly, but they also do some good Pinot Gris, some Pinot Noir. And they immigrated here and eventually made their way to California, where they planted grapevines and started making wines of their own here. They had a decent run of it. They were selling mostly jug wine into San Francisco, which, due to the gold rush had become very populated. And they'd wagon train it down to Napa, put it on a barge, bring it over to San Francisco, and people would enjoy it. Unfortunately, they were shut down by Prohibition. I consider that kind of the black stain on our drinking culture here in America. Wish it never happened, but it did. And during that time, my family resorted to growing prunes and walnuts right here in Napa Valley on the same plot of land. And they continued to do that, but they also continued to make a little bit of wine every year and grow their own grapes. And they'd sell the grapes up the road to the likes of Inglenook and Beaulieu Vineyards. So they kept their craft and skills. And many people don't know this, but during Prohibition, you were allowed to make 250 gallons of wine per person in each household. And that was used for sacramental purposes, whatever your personal use was, cooking, etc. So they allowed that. And I mean, I'm thinking like 250 gallons of wine per person for a year. That's a lot of wine. If anybody out there is drinking 250 gallons of wine per year, just like send me your DNA and we'll call up Bill Gates and try to replicate you. So they weren't making ends meet in the late 60s with prunes and walnuts being their primary crops. And they decided that they would try their hand in the wine business again. And in 1972, my grandparents, Lorna and Charlie, along with my dad at 19 years old, started Camus Vineyards. And the three of them, it wasn't a time when people were getting into the wine business like it is now. It wasn't a glorified thing. Nobody knew about the romance. It was mostly jug wines out of California. And there were a few kind of shining stars at that time. And it was just at the beginning of the California, focus on prestigious wines and trying to become something on a global scale that would contend with the best of the best. And they began with Pinot Noir and Riesling because of my grandfather's Alsatian roots. And they realized by 1975 that Cabernet was king, and they began to focus their efforts on Cabernet right here in Rutherford in Napa Valley, which we're in Rutherford currently in the cellar right now. This is not the Camus Vineyards property. We have a winery just up the road for Copper Cane, and that's where we're at. But, so they started focusing on Cabernet, and today, as we know it, Cabernet and Camus are synonymous with each other. And so the focus was always that until I came on board, started making Pinot Noir and screwing around with some other things, and then eventually starting Copper Cane in 2014 to bring all those experiments that I'd been, doing over years, just trying new things. Curiosity has always been something that we've acted upon and tried to learn from, and felt that there was a need for these styles of wines to come out and express something different from the terroir where the grapes are grown. And that was the philosophy we started with. So in a nutshell, that's the family history. That's my personal history. And it's been a fun run. And I mean, at the end of the day, all I can say is that I'm really happy that people are out there enjoying fine wines from California and Oregon, and just exploring the world of wine. I mean, what other product can you think of that has like 14,000 active individual products in the U.S. right now? You think of tissue paper, think of any kind of deli meats or anything like that. there's nothing that has that many options. And what I love about it is that you may find yourself drinking a Rioja and think, oh, maybe I like Rioja. You try a few more, and then maybe you end up traveling over to Rioja, and you get to absorb their culture, their food, their wines, lifestyle, and that's part of the beauty of wine. I mean, there's not really a bad element about wine and what it brings to your personal life, and I think what it brings to the happiness of the world.
That's awesome. Well, I feel like that's a pretty good segue into when we talk about exploring wines. We've got 3 that we're going to explore here today. So looks like you've got your Elouan Chardonnay up and ready, right?
I started early, and I think we should raise a glass to everybody.
Hey,
thank you all for joining.
Cheers. Yeah, absolutely. So as we kind of get into this and we talk about the Elouan Chardonnay, before we go any further, when you crack a bottle of wine and you go in to start tasting, how do you approach that? Whether it's yours or somebody else's, how do you approach kind of that tasting experience? And what advice would you give to everyday kind of yeoman like me?
The fundamentals are, I mean, many people can overthink it, and decanting is a good thing almost always if you want to, but it's not a necessity. What I like to do is, start off with a pretty big bowl, right? The glass should have a pretty big bowl to it, so that you can put a hefty amount in there without overfilling the glass. You want to fill it, somewhere around maybe about a third or so. You don't want to go beyond the widest point of the glass in particular. So you want oxygen interaction with that wine while it sits in the glass. And the reason I say a big bowl is so that you can watch it develop on your own, rather than having to continue to re-pour. So that's number one. Now, when you're looking at the wine, and the fundamentals go for both whites and reds, I like to look at kind of the edge of the wine in the glass and see what color that is. Sometimes if it's oxidized, it'll be a little more brown. So you want to see something more of a vibrant color, like in the Chardonnay, more of a vibrant golden color. In reds, you want to see more vibrant purples and reds. And then also density, especially when it comes to reds. How deep and dark is that color? Next thing is, swirl the glass. That helps with bringing more oxygen into the wine, releasing more of those aromatics. And if you're not too acquainted with that, you can put it down on a table like this, spin it around, and then once you do this, and then you can start doing it with your other hand, that's your not dominant hand, and whatever else, you can do it behind your head. But then you go ahead after you swirl and take a sniff. But the important part about when you smell is you want to be breathing a little bit through your mouth as well. So what we call the olfactory is kind of taste and smell all together. So while you're smelling, you want to breathe in through your mouth and nose at the same time. That'll help really expand those flavors or those aromatics. And then after a few first sniffs, then you go ahead and give it a taste. And similarly, when it comes to tasting, number one, I like to kind of bubble the wine while it's in my mouth a little bit, and that helps with a little more oxygen, and then also breathing in through my nose and mouth at the same time. And oftentimes I've got to say this too. We in the wine business, we overthink wines just as a common trait. We smell and taste for all of these very, very nuanced elements. And even us that are, winemakers and assessing wines at that level, and we're, looking at a wine we order at dinner or whatever, and we critique it all to hell for the first smell and first sip, and then we just enjoy it. And that's right. that's really the beauty of it. Once you go, okay, I've vetted this out. I love this wine, and now I'm going to drink the hell out of it. So that's kind of the core of it, right? I mean, that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Well, I'll admit to you and to everyone watching, I am no wine expert. I am no sommelier. I like that last part that you said, where the first sip's great, but from there on, that's where I'm all in. So Chardonnay, tell us a little bit about Chardonnay, what makes it unique, what makes it special, and then let's go into what makes this, kind of along that same line, or what makes it a little different from other Chardonnays on the shelf.
So, Chardonnay, there's a whole spectrum of Chardonnay, and, it can grow well in hot climates and in cool climates, and you're going to get very different results between the two. But Chardonnay is undoubtedly the king of white wines in America. It is the most enjoyed white wine out there. And I think it's also because of the diversity that it has this span of style, and I'll talk about that in a second. But it also pairs great with food. It's got good balance, both at the warm end and cool end of the spectrum where you're growing it. And so being a food wine, I think is first the most important thing of a wine, right? I mean, we're not just sitting around drinking wine. I mean, hey, if that's what you want to do, that I do that every once in a while. I'm doing that right now for that matter. But typically, when we assess our wines to go to bottle after we get our final blend done, we'll bring it out and go to lunch or dinner and taste that sample and make sure that it hits all the marks with foods that we like, that we think are going to pair well with it. And if that works, then we go ahead and bottle it. So now what do I think about this Chardonnay? Well, let me first talk about the opposite end of the spectrum of Chardonnay here. So you may have heard the term cougar juice. Have you ever heard that?
Yes, I have.
Okay. It's one of my favorite terms in the wine business. Glad it was created. I don't know who created that, but they were just idiots for not trademarking it. My God, could you imagine?
No kidding.
So cougar juice is something that would be like very big, very oaky, having a lot of butter present because of the malolactic fermentation, but also a riper style of Chardonnay. So very dense and very rich. On the opposite end of the spectrum is something from a cooler climate. So cougar juice is typically from, and there's nothing wrong with cougar juice. There's a time and a place for it. It's typically in like a 45-year-old female's hands. And that's why it's called cougar juice. But no, it goes great with things like salmon and those big kind of rich buttery types of fish, I guess, or really fatty fish. Now you go to the more elegant side of the spectrum, and that's where Elouan comes in. Now we make 3 Chardonnays. This is the most delicate and elegant of the 3. We have a Boeing Chardonnay as well, which is kind of more tropical toned, really vibrant, fun wine, very coastal driven. And then we also have our Quilt Chardonnay, and Quilt Chardonnay is kind of our version of cougar juice, so to speak. And I hate to just phrase cougar juice like it's some bastardized type of wine, but it is, again, has a time and a place for that type of wine. So with Elouan here, because of Oregon, where it's located, as you move up in latitude, you start seeing longer daylight hours during summer months. But because of its northern exposure, you also have much cooler temperatures. That cooler temperature on average keeps the acidity much higher. And that drives a character of minerality, like I'd say a chalkiness almost in the wine. And that's something that we look for in these cooler regions for Chardonnay. And that's when I say elegance. Elegance comes along with minerality, very clean lines, very clean style, not overly pungent with oak characters, but it does have a presence of that new oak. So that's what we're trying to achieve with this wine. Now, when I think about this as a food wine, I think that Chardonnays that have higher acidity, like take traditional Burgundy, right? White Burgundy, they're great food wines, and they generally are more in line with this more elegant traditional style of Chardonnay. So I think that there's kind of a history to these styles of Chardonnay and what they can do on the table. And this personally is my favorite of the 3 Chardonnays that we produce. It also happens to be the lowest priced Chardonnay that we produce. But again, price doesn't matter. And Jordan, as you were saying, you don't need to know a lot about wine. You just need to know that there are wines out there that you like. And I always encourage people to get out there and try some crazy food pairings, because we always think, oh, I'm getting a cab, or getting a steak, I gotta have a cab. I'm getting lamb, I gotta have a pinot. I'm getting salmon, I gotta have a Chardonnay. And get outside of that box. Go have some fun. Buy some like spicy Thai food. Try it with a Pinot Noir from Oregon that's a little bit chilled. It's going to be a great pairing. Even like street tacos. There's a pairing out there for every dish. And where we traditionally think of like beer and tacos, no, wine is a much more suitable and pleasant pairing in my mind. So that's my opinion on it. But that's kind of the story of Elouan and our general focus on wines pairing with food.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So this Chardonnay, it was aged in oak barrels. That's correct.
Yep, that is correct.
Do you guys do any that are not aged in oak? Do you do any stainless steel fermentation for any of these, or is it all oak?
Everything goes into barrel. Okay. We do a portion of our rosé with stainless steel, and then the rest of that is done in what we call neutral barrels, meaning that we've used those maybe in the past for Chardonnay. So a lot of the initial impact of the barrel is reduced. And that's something that rosé generally doesn't like to have a lot of oak. So you want maybe a little bit, but you don't want it to be those high tones of new oak. So when it comes to the Elouan Chardonnay, this Chardonnay is about 60% new oak. It's all French. I could talk a little bit about barrels here in a little bit. But what we do with our new barrels is that we actually strip them with either use of long-term steam, where we have this kind of steam wand that we put into the barrel itself, and then we put it in, leave it in there for about 20 minutes. And as that steam penetrates deeper into the oak and then condenses, you'll see this in the belly of the barrel. And as we dump it out, it's this brown liquid that's extremely tannic. So we pull a lot of those initial tannins out of the barrel so that it's not overpowering into our wines, where we want our wine, the core of the wine, to really show through, rather than the barrel to be the thumbprint of the wine. So that's one of our barrel philosophies that isn't just for Chardonnay. That's something you'll also see with the Boeing, with the Belle Glos, with the quilt wines. Anything that goes into oak goes into a stripped barrel.
Gotcha. Interesting. So when you guys were coming up with the various kind of brands under Copper Cane, talk about Elouan. Like, what inspired you to create Elouan? What does that word Elouan mean? And where did that inspiration come from?
So, it was, 2012, I got some curiosity about Oregon. I, had been farming along the coast of California for, over a decade, and felt like we were making great wines in California, and I was tasting some really good wines out of Oregon. And so curiosity just had me go up there and got to know some people, bought a few tons from a few different growers that year, experimented with it. We never released a 2012 vintage of Elouan. But we got our bearings up there. We got to know what it was we wanted to achieve, and we started Elouan with the 2013 vintage. It did start off with curiosity, but we saw that there was an expression of Pinot Noir that was quite different than anything we were doing in California, and so wanted to and felt that there was a need to bring that out to the market. Now, after we started the Pinot Noir, of course, we started experimenting with other things, the rosé, Chardonnay, etc. We're still playing with things like sparkling wine. We may never release one, but we're just curious and always wanting to try new things. So with the 2013 vintage, we felt like we had a plan and a process that was going to allow us to make consistent, great style wine for every vintage in the future. And so I started thinking about a name. And when I was thinking about a name, I was thinking, what are the differences between what we do in California and what we're doing up in Oregon? And it really came down to that point I made earlier about the latitude as you move upwards. So during the longest day of the year, right, summer solstice, we have 45 minutes more of sunlight in Oregon than we do in California, and really central coast of California. So taking those two barometers where we have Pinot Noir and Pinot Noir, and realizing that they're ripening through very different processes, one being purely photosynthesis up in Oregon with all of those daylight hours and more exposure to sun, versus California, which has quite a bit of daylight hours, but also has more heat. And that heat and dryness pushes a little bit of desiccation, or dehydration, as we call it. And that dehydration creates a beefier, kind of richer, more fruit-forward style of Pinot Noir. So we saw these as two kind of counterpoints to each other, but both respectable styles of Pinot Noir, and both something that we wanted to expose to the American audience. And so that's where our inspiration was for it. So the name Elouan, that was a long story to get to the name.
That's all right.
The name Elouan means good light. And that was a Breton word, which is a form of Old English. And it was adopted as a name for, in the French culture, as a name for a young girl. And the way that I found out about this name is maybe my favorite part of the story. I have 6 children, and only 2 of them are girls. And so Elouan was a name that never got used. And so when I was thinking about names, and I was thinking about, it's really about the light up there, and thinking back to this name that was like on the top of the list, and it was Elouan, and I thought that really fits, and it's a beautiful name. It's got kind of a feminine vibe to it too, and that's really what we feel about Oregon Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and meaning good light just kind of brought the whole thing around, and gave us a little more purpose. So that's where the name came from.
Awesome. So my family on my dad's side emigrated from Belgium and settled in Iowa, and on my mom's side and my dad's side actually are farmers. So I'm descended, my grandparents and great grandparents on both sides were farmers, and mostly corn, soybeans, things like that. So in Iowa, they just finished their harvest right now for corn. My cousin still farm the same land that my mom grew up on. Do you find that your harvest seasons are different in, say, the Russian River Valley than they are up in Oregon? Is that a different process, or is it kind of same thing, just different time frames? What's that look like? How do you decide how to harvest and when to harvest?
It's mostly same things, different time frames. So we'll give you a kind of an extreme example. Bud break is really when our season starts. Typically speaking, we'll get bud break down in, say, Santa Maria Valley sometime in February or March. We won't see bud break until at the very earliest April up in Oregon, more typically a little bit later than that. And so that begins our season a little bit later, right? But we're also picking Oregon Pinot Noir at the same time we're picking Napa Valley Cabernet. Right towards the end of the season, usually it's a rush to get it in before the rains. And then we in California, just about all the Pinot is already picked up by the time we even get into Napa Valley Cabernet or Oregon Pinot Noir. So just a very different timeline. And there are some different elements in farming, of course, but we see that along the coast of California as well. Every site needs something specific. It's just a little more extreme when you look at the location of Oregon versus where we're at in California.
Okay. And do you do mostly mechanical harvesting, or is it by hand, or does it kind of vary depending on the vineyard and the practice?
Varies depending on the vineyard, varies depending on what the need is. If we're rushing to get everything off before rain, like we just had, just over about 2 weeks ago, we'll do whatever the hell we need to do to get it off. So, it's probably the same thing in farming corn, where you get to a point you're like, oh, it can hang out there for another 2 weeks without it getting overripe, but then you're like, well, we got rain coming, so let's pick it all. But yeah, so it does, environmental factors or just kind of the seasonal factors are really what drive a lot of those decisions. But overall, what we've seen from a quality perspective between the two, we don't see any difference now. We've got hand picking is great. The grapes come in clean. We run them through a destemmer. We don't crush the grapes. That's one thing we always strive to do, is keep the grapes whole. And then they go into tank. With machine picking, the machines have gotten so advanced now that they're actually doing destemming on board. And so you're ending up with what you want to put in tank directly in a tub that's on the machine, and you bring that into the winery and put it in directly into a tank. So it's been pretty amazing. Technology, we see it in our everyday lives, right? Cell phones and access to, media, whatever it is. But technology has advanced so greatly in the farming side of things, and nobody ever sees that. But it is one of the coolest elements of the advances we've seen, and really happy to see it be here and be applied to grapes.
Yeah, that sounds like the old corn combines that my family uses. So very cool. Hey, I think we have a question from someone that's watching right now. Jennifer says, "Hey Joe, how long does it take from grape to glass?" That's a good question.
All right. Well, we prefer to talk about grapes to mouth. Just kidding. At the end of the day, that it's got to be ready to drink. So grapes to glass. Every variety is different. I'll start with the shortest term, right? Rosé, because we don't do long-term aging in oak. We picked that very early in the season. So we picked that probably sometime in August this year. And then what happens with whites and rosé, the only difference between a rosé and a red wine is that rosé is a wine made out of red fruit, but doesn't have contact with the skins during fermentation. So we bring those clusters in, we press them, get all the juice out, and then we put that into stainless steel or oak, and then we do our fermentation. Now, we'll probably be bottling that sometime in January, so it doesn't see a lot of aging time. So let's call that 4 months. Our Pinot Noirs and most of our Chardonnays are more in like the 10 to 12 month range as far as from the time we harvest to the time it goes to bottle. And then Cabernet is the longest that we have, which is typically 16 to 18 months, but we do get up to about 24 months at times if the wine calls for it. So it really is more of a reactive process. But generally speaking, those are kind of the timelines of the varietal. So as early as 3 or 4 months, as long as 2 years. And then we may hold on to those bottles for a period of time before we release them into the marketplace. That could be 3 months, 6 months. I'd say 6 months is more common, where we just want the wine to kind of settle down, age a little bit, and then release it. So that's kind of how we go about it.
Okay. Hey, just out of curiosity, as I'm sitting there looking at you, what's in those barrels directly behind you?
Oh, this is a special project.
Oh,
This is we started this actually down 2010 down in Argentina, where we were making wine down there and then bringing it up here and aging it in California. So we haven't released this yet, but this is an Argentinian Malbec, and you know, I could give you a little tour here. Actually, this might be really interesting because we got these barrels over here. You think you can shoot those? Sure. Sorry, we got Alejandro over here manning the camera. Oh. There we go. All right, so we do this regularly with our barrels. So we want to see. This is a this is a Chardonnay from Santa Rita Hills, and this was fermented in barrel. But this is a glass barrel head, which is not common. You know, usually they're all wood. But we do this to a number of our barrels so that we can assess it during its aging process. And we'll toss these, you know, intermixed throughout different lots or, you know, different fermentations, both red and white, to see a number of things. But I'm going to see, Alejandro, can you zoom in a little bit here? So you can kind of see a little line right here. Mm-hmm. So this line is actually our fermentation line. So we pressed those grapes, then we put the juice in here. We added yeast. Actually, this was a native yeast fermentation for this, what we call the Glacier Holt Vineyard. And then once the fermentation was done, meaning there was no more sugar to be fermented, we go ahead and we top it up. That line here is what the fermentation line was, because you need a little headspace because sometimes white wines get a little foamy and you don't want to make a huge mess in your cellar. And you got CO2 covering it, so you're all good. Now let's scroll all the way down here if you can. I don't know if you guys can see this here, but it looks like mud.
Yeah.
All right. So this is what we call lees. And lees are just the fine solids that you'll find in wine. Sometimes you'll see them in your bottle if the wine was maybe unfiltered. But, you know, most commonly we see lees, especially early on in a harvest or early on in a vintage. Heavy lees will drop to the bottom and continue to kind of accumulate down here. What we like to do with this is assess how much lees we have here. The important thing about lees is if we're trying to build up mouthfeel in a wine, we want to keep those lees in contact with the wine even during its aging process. So we'll actually go through and stir each of these barrels on a weekly or every 2-week basis. And what we get from that are polysaccharides that are absorbed into the wine, contributing to a kind of denser, broader mouthfeel. Now, if you're not stirring those up and you leave those in there, they can go anaerobic and start making off aromas or off flavors. So we need to watch that too. But keeping them mixed in suspension is one of the things that we do. So this is a very cool thing to just be able to have right here so you guys can see. And now if we walk over to this barrel, give you guys a quick rundown on what a barrel is and what all these things mean. So this right here is just the mark of the cooperage. This is Tonnellaire O. What I like about these guys is it's French oak, but they bring all of the wood milled to California and then they make the barrels here. The benefit for them is that they cut down on logistics, so they're able to fit a hell of a lot more wood in than having 50 in our case 53 gallons of just air that's shipping in a container. What I like about it is we do a lot of experimentation with barrels, and so we can call them up and say, hey, this experiment worked, but we want to add on to it, and they can do a turnaround in like 1 to 2 weeks and get us barrels so that we progress even faster.
Wow.
And so they do all of their toasting, all of their cooperage here. Now, if we zoom in down here, I hope you guys can see this. I need to, there, okay. So this is just some information on what we have here. So this is 2017 Argentinian Malbec in a 2016 barrel. That means we received this barrel, it was used for 1 year, and then we dropped in this case, in this portion being the neutral oak portion. What we have here is just the statements of what it is. 53 gallons, that's a smaller barrel, so we get a little more surface to liquid ratio, so you get a little more of an impact from the barrel. Typical barrels are about 59 gallons. These fancy words here, Trancé and Juppy, these are 2 forests in the center of France that denote where the wood was actually grown, where it was harvested from. These 2 forests are very tight grain, meaning that the grain here is extremely tight, so you get much sweeter tones out of it, but it does take a little bit longer to extract those tones out of it. And thin stave means that this stave right here These are about 6 to 7 millimeters narrower than your standard stave, meaning wood being porous, you have more interaction with oxygen throughout the aging process. Boost is just a proprietary toasting technique that we do. It's kind of like a quick flash at the end, not charring it like you do in whiskey, but getting, after you get this kind of medium, long, sort of deep penetrating toast, to get a little bit of char on the edges, on the interior of the barrel. Toasted heads, you got around 30% of your barrel, which is the head of the barrel, this whole thing right here, that are not commonly toasted. So we like to toast all of our heads so we get that impact from the toasted heads. But barrels are something that really do make a big difference in the wine, they also can be a little overdone and really affect the wine in a negative way. So we're very cautious of that. We definitely taste. I mean, we'll taste every one of these barrels, I don't know, I'd say 3-4 times throughout its aging life before we actually start blending and see where it's at and see if we need to change anything. But you just got to keep on it. And I think that our process being much more reactive, we want to taste the wine, see where it's at, make a plan, and go from there. So it's not a recipe-driven approach. It's very much just a reaction to whatever is going to be the best decision for the wine.
That's awesome. Hey, that is great insight. Thank you for the kind of the tour and the inside scoop. Lowe's Foods and Copper Cane bringing the inside scoop on that fun Argentinian Malbec that's coming. We're looking forward to that. Listen, we're gonna take a quick break and watch the video for our next wine, which is the Boeing Russian River Pinot Noir. We're gonna come back, talk a little bit more about barrels. So check out this video, grab that Boeing, and we'll be right back with Joe Wagner.
Every day when I get out in the vineyards, I'm happy to know that I'm part of something that brings happiness to everyday life. The name Boeing means farm and goes straight back to my roots. We're getting back into farming in a bigger way throughout California's coast, and I'm very excited about it. This is our Appellation specific line of Pinot Noirs, starting right here in the beautiful Russian River Valley. What makes Russian River Valley so unique is not just the climate with its coastal influence, but it's also the soils. These soils have been deposited here over thousands of years, creating an amazingly rich topsoil that these grapes just thrive in. It's known for this really nice, dense fruit core, a little bit of spice, some minerality, and a really brisk acidity that goes great with a broad array of foods. I'm also very proud to say that I'm a multi-generational farmer carrying on the traditions that have lasted centuries. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Joe, for the inside scoop there, man. That was really awesome. We got Boeing now, and we've got some really cool kind of variations of Pinot Noir at play here, right, in the Boeing family. So we're drinking the Russian River. What is it about this kind of appellation and this variety that kind of stands out from the other ones and that makes this one kind of fun and unique?
So I first started with Russian River Valley back when we had a brand called Mayomi for a while. You guys may have heard of it.
Wait, what was that again? Yeah, not ringing a bell.
It's garbage now. They went to California Appellation, and it tastes like they added corn syrup and food coloring to some crappy wine. So, anyways, no. I used to make Mayomi, own the brand of ushering that through to it, a place we could never bring it. I was in the fine wine world, and that thing got to just a massive scale. But we were working with 3 different areas: Sonoma, Monterey, Santa Barbara County, and within Sonoma was the Russian River. So I got acquainted with Russian River very well. Then we started making the Dairyman Vineyard Designate under Belle Glos, and realized that while Dairyman is a very singular expression of Pinot Noir because it's from one location, the vast sort of elements at play in Russian River Valley, it's a pretty big appellation. And so the goal with the Boeing Appellation series was really to take different pockets of each of these appellations: Santa Lucia Highlands, Santa Maria Valley, and Russian River Valley, to create something that was going to be more general appellation rather than singular vineyard designate, but still trying to express that. And so through the Mayomi days, while we were working with all of those different areas, but blending them all together at the end of the day, so you had this plethora of different characters. This is a little more of a refined approach to expressing Russian River. Now, Russian River has got an amazing name in the world of wine, especially when it comes to Pinot Noir. And the reason for that is that it just grows great Pinot Noir. And from a winemaking perspective, you can go with the extreme cool areas of Russian River or the warmer areas and create different styles of wine. That's part of the beauty of it. But Pinot Noir is, as a variety, the most expressive variety out there, and the one variety that can transcend the vineyard site better than any other variety, meaning what we call terroir. The soil, the climate, some cultural practices, clonal selection, those all play a role, even aspect and row orientation. So if you're able to take those grapes and turn them into wine, Pinot Noir is the one that shows those elements at play best in the bottle and in the glass. Cabernet, you don't quite see that variation from vineyard site to vineyard site, but that's why we started doing vineyard designation, and then started kind of like tiering down from there with creating wines that are a little more general, more appellation specific, which is where we landed upon with Boeing Russian River Valley. So Russian River, while we talk about thousands of years of these sedimentary deposits, it is kind of more of a gravelly loam predominantly out there, but there are some little pockets of volcanics, but the soils vary greatly, as do the climates. If you're moving kind of through some of these coastal hills versus some of the flatlands, you're going to get a very different sort of character. But nonetheless, what we have there is a coastal influence, and that coastal influence brings fog in. So California, the Central Valley gets hot. All of that hot air goes up. It pulls all of this moisture and cool weather off the Pacific at nighttime in the afternoon, and you wake up in the morning to, it could be 50 degrees outside. And then by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it could be 90 degrees. So we have this huge what we call diurnal shift, meaning from daytime high to nighttime low, which is great for grapes, and does great for Pinot Noir. But in this area, Russian River, it helps to mitigate the ripeness. So we want a long season. We want these grapes to hang on the vine for as long as possible, because that's where you get development of your phenolics, those mouthfeel components and flavors. And so that's an important part to us. And Russian River Valley has proven for decades now that it is a fantastic area for being able to produce world-class Pinot Noir. So let's go ahead. I was going to say let's give it a taste, but before you do, you'll notice the depth and darkness of this wine. This is not a common Pinot Noir, in my opinion. We like to see that. We like to push the limits on that. There's a few elements that we employ that we've created back in starting in 2006. One of the most important, I know you got to see the Copper Cane video, or saw some points on Copper Cane, which is kind of the foundation of our style, which really is about physiological ripeness rather than sugar maturity. In this case, once we pick, we actually layer in dry ice to freeze the cell walls, or actually freeze the skins of the grapes. And what that does is rupture the cell walls, much like putting a soda can in the freezer, right? So as that liquid freezes, it'll pop open. Those cells are what carry all of those compounds, the color compounds and those mouthfeel compounds. We want more access to those. That is what Mother Nature gave us, in the grapes, and our job is to make sure we extract every bit of what Mother Nature gave us. So what we call cryo extraction using freezing methods is one important factor. So we're able to create darker, denser wines. The next step is a cold fermentation. And I'm speaking specifically about reds at this point. So we do this for not just our Pinot Noirs, but also our Cabernets, Zinfandel, et cetera. We do not do it for any white wines or rosé. Cold fermentation means that if we're suppressing the temperature of a fermentation, it's going to suppress the growth of the yeast. And the yeast are not going to be able to really get a strong foothold and burn through the sugar very quickly, which gives us more time in tank, which gives us more time to extract those characters. And during that period, we're pumping over, meaning taking the fermenting juice from down below and putting it back over the cap, kind of like a coffee filter, a percolating coffee filter, or we're punching down, meaning mixing that. The cap is kind of this cake on the top of the fermenter that starts to develop once fermentation begins, and all the solids rise up to the top because your two byproducts of fermentation. So your yeast are consuming sugar and they're producing alcohol and CO2. That CO2 comes out of solution, the alcohol stays in solution. So all that CO2 pulls all the solids up, but we want interaction with the fermenting juice below with the cap above. So that's where all of these elements come in play. So, and that's how we get much darker wine. So we get a much longer period of active fermentation to slowly coax out those characters rather than over extract them.
Interesting. And so Pinot Noir, I worked in a Lowe's food store for a while in the beer and wine department. And when guests come in and they're looking for a red wine to take to some sort of shindig or get together, I love using the word shindig in a sentence.
Shindig.
But when it's a great word. So when they're going to some sort of engagement, I always try to steer them towards Pinot Noir because it feels to me like it's wine snobs can get down on Pinot Noir, but folks that may be into like kind of the lighter, sweeter fare can get in on it too. Because it's got kind of a fruit forward, kind of fun, easy drinking flair to it. Is that something that you guys have really embraced and tried to play out? Or is it, do you feel like there's a lot more complexity there, that more so than the average kind of consumer may be looking into?
I think it's really both. I think there's a ton more complexity and nuance in Pinot Noir than there is in most other red varietals. But that said, Pinot Noir is naturally a low tannin variety, right? So if you think about Cabernet, if you get one of those mountain cabs, it's got a ton of tannin, a bunch of grip to it. It can be really tight and maybe invasive to somebody's palate. Mm-hmm. And it has low acidity naturally. Cabernet does. So it relies upon that tannin to really give it some balance. But there is a point when it goes over, right? When too much acid and too much tannin can really bind up on the palate. Pinot Noir is the opposite of Cabernet. Pinot Noir has low tannin and naturally high acidity. So it's a little more vibrant on the palate, and more delicate overall. But I think that makes it something that is going to be accommodating to a broader audience. So if you're just getting a glass of something and you order a Pinot Noir, unless you know with absolute certainty that you love those big, massive, grippy mountain cabs, Pinot Noir is going to fill a much broader spectrum of the audience, in my opinion. And I also think that it's a much better food wine for the same reason. You can pair Pinot Noir with salmon, chicken, all the way up to steak, and of course all the classics in between like duck and lamb. But Cabernet, you're a little more pigeonholed on the bigger end of that, right? With bigger meats and that sort of thing. And then you have Chardonnay, which needs more lighter fare to really to work with it. So Pinot Noir does have that ability to run the gamut, and I think that's one of the strong suits. I actually joke with my dad. He still makes Camus Cabernet, and I started telling him maybe 5 years ago. I was like, sometime in my lifetime, Pinot Noir is going to be more widely enjoyed than Cabernet, because Cabernet is the king of the reds right now. And he's like, no, there's no way in hell that's ever going to happen. And, and so I was like, for all these reasons, I genuinely think that Pinot Noir, and I still do believe that Pinot Noir is the it's the most difficult grape to grow, most difficult wine to make, but as more and more producers are understanding how to work with it and creating amazing wines, it is the most accommodating variety out there for from every aspect, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Well, okay, so we can't let you off the hook. This is Lowe's Foods, and we ask the hard hitting questions, Joe Wagner. So listen, screw tops.
Great.
What this is hotly debated, and we won't go into synthetic versus natural corks and that kind of thing. But we're seeing more and more screw tops on the grocery store shelves and even on the boutique wine shop shelves. What's your take on that as kind of as an expert in the field? Where do you land on that?
So we transitioned Maomi over to screw cap around 2007 vintage. And I got a little bit of hate mail, I'll be honest. People were like, that used to be my favorite wine and you ruined it by putting a screw cap on it. And I was like, we've done our trials. This is a better closure. So this gets a little deep. So you gotta go with me on this ride for a second, okay?
I'm ready. Let's dive in.
All right. What I've learned is that an oxygen deprived environment is actually a better environment for a wine in bottle. Screw cap achieves that better than cork with a standard foil capsule. So we made the change starting with 07 and then seeing this progression to any wine that we intend to be more user friendly, enjoyed within the first 5-10 years of release, to be under screw cap. Now we've gone back through and I've tasted some 20-year-old Napa cabs, like Plump Jack is a great example. They do a portion of their same wine in cork as they do in screw cap, about half and half. And we've pulled out these, call them 18-year-old wines and tasted them side by side, and hands down with everybody, every time we've done it, the screw cap wins. Now, the reason why is that the screw cap, with the barrier to hold back more oxygen, maintains more of a fruit component. When you get older wines, they start to lose that fruit and go more forest floor, spice driven, but not maybe the best spice. And so we've seen that environment is better for wines. And so we have come to the conclusion that we have two options for our wines. One is screw cap, and the other is a cork. And if we're doing cork, we're doing a wax seal on the top. And that's why you see the Elouan Reserves in wax seal. You see in the Quilt Reserve in wax seal, because this also accommodates that oxygen deprived environment. Now, this is where I wanted you to go on the ride with me, because I started thinking, what is it that got everybody thinking that you needed to age your wines for so long and in this way or that way? And you go back and you think that same storyline of 20 years, 30 years down the road, if you even have the patience for that, is what you should do. But that was back in a day when everybody waxed their bottles, and then that continued to go forward when people started using foil as the common kind of finish on your closure. And I don't think that was the right choice. And I would say that those older waxed wines, if you have something from, say, 1940 or something that's waxed, it's probably holding up better than something from 1980 that's got a foil and cork. So that's kind of where I stand on it. That's what we've learned. I've gone back actually with the Las Alturas vintage, because this is one of those that we did a lot of trials on with unfiltered, unfined, and whatever else. But we also did closure trials on it. And we've seen anything that we held back that was not waxed compared to wax starting in 2004 that shows much better results in aging with the wax on it. So now I'll talk real quick about the actual closure itself, and I'll also open the bottle of Belle Glos or talk to you about that. But if you can all, and maybe if you can zoom in, thank you. If you can all look at the interior of this closure, and the majority of the closures you see out there, they actually have, you actually see the threads, right? So here are the threads. You actually see the threads on the screw cap. That is applied through a compression application where a head spins down that tin around this thread and compresses it on there. Now, you don't get a perfect seal every time with those. We started working with this company called Guala. They make this closure called the WAC, and it's got a pre-built insert that is not a compression application, but a torque application. So it spins it down to the perfect level of torque and gives us a perfect seal every time. And that is what we're looking for. So I think somebody called it the Gucci of screw caps at some point. So
Ooh,
I was like,
you fancy.
I'll take it. I'll take it. Now, while we're talking about closures, I do want to open the Belle Glos because I know everybody's going to be doing this next. So we'll zoom in again real quick. It took us like over a decade to figure out that we needed to do something about this because we never had this pull tab, and I did get hate mail for this too.
People cutting their hands and stuff like that. It's terrible.
Oh yeah, people cut their hands. I mean, I felt horrible about it, and so finally we created this thing. It's just a little bulbous end here. You just grab it, spin it around. If you don't want to use your hands, this is a little bit of a classier way to do it. Take your screw pull and pinch it, and then you just twist it. And it works just fine. And then you have right on the top a nice little target on where you should put your corkscrew. And that's something people always do. They always think they got to put their corkscrew in offset. You always want to go straight down the middle. So that is my assessment of screw cap versus cork. And I hope that wasn't too boring for y'all out there.
But, hey, like I said, I mean, people go to Cronkite and then they go to us for the hard hitting questions. You know, like we are top of the line news, man. It's great. Thank you for indulging us. I appreciate that. So I think, you know, when we jump into the Belle Glos, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about those specific vineyards. But while we're on the topic of kind of opening the bottle, what's your take on, you know, because there's a lot of talk about aeration and letting a bottle breathe, especially for kind of a young new wine like this. What's the kind of the best practice that our consumers should be kind of, you know, getting behind in terms of opening one of these? And do you want to let it kind of breathe for a little bit, and then when we're done with it, close it back up, just screw the top back on? We're cool with that?
Yeah, so screw cap does hold up for a good period of time. I think even a little bit longer than cork. I typically say 3 to 4 days is kind of as long as you want to open a wine and let it draw down if you're drinking a glass or two a night. But there are a couple things that if you're really serious about wanting to learn about wines, and I actually think that the very best thing to do is invest. There's a company called Coravin. I don't know if you guys sell them at Lowe's. Do you?
I don't know that we sell them, but we are familiar with them. I think a couple of our stores use them actually.
So they came up with a new product because their other one was, you know, for, I mean, you know, holding the wine for, you want to take a sip of it, but you want to enjoy it, you know, a month later or whatever, 6 months later, and it'll stay the same. They came up with a new one that's called the Coravin Pivot, and you get these little silicone inserts, crack the bottle, put them in, and it already has a barrier in there. And then you take the device, the pivot device, and put it in there. It's got inert gas that'll displace the wine in there, pour it in your glass. But what I like about that system is you can get, you know, say 6 of those silicone stoppers and buy 6 bottles of wine, open them all and do a taste test. Because most of us aren't going to, you know, open 6 bottles of wine in one night unless you're having a party or something. But if you really want to learn about it, open those 6 bottles, you know, take a cross section of California Pinot to find out what you really like. Because it's so hard to say, God, I really loved that wine, but I think I like this one better, but it wasn't with the same food. It wasn't on the same night, whatever. So that gives you the ability to really do a comparative tasting. And those wines will hold up in that for a matter of 3 months is what I think the company states that it'll do. So I think that's a great way to do it. When it comes to other ways, I mean, my personal preference and my recommendation to everyone out there is that you all should be able to consume at least 1 whole bottle per night. And if you can't do that, you know, then you know, we all got some work to do. So
that's right. I love it. Well, that's a can-do spirit. I like that.
Yeah.
I think we have a question from someone that's watching live. Let's see. So Josh Fisher said, what's your favorite memory of a food and wine experience?
Oh, geez. There's one that sticks out in my mind right now because it just happened. But it was you know, kind of like expected. It was at a restaurant that a friend of ours bought us a ticket to. It's a place called Single Thread over in Healdsburg. And it's, you know, a little bit of an Asian flair, but they also do wine pairings. And I think they did like 10 courses or something. So it was really an experience, not just a dinner. And the wine and food team did a great job of pairing these wines with each dish. And, you know, when you get that and you're, you know, it's not too much food, it's just a couple bites and a couple sips, and you're like, wow, that's phenomenal. Wow, that's phenomenal. Wow, that's phenomenal. Those are great experiences. But I also like just the simple ones, and I think that's you know, I mean, I'd call it simple, but every Thanksgiving, I'm not a huge fan of turkey breast, so I just buy turkey legs. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, dark meat, team dark meat all the way.
Yeah, I am dark meat, man. So what I do is I've got this duck fat that I've had. I originally, clarified duck fat, had, a bunch of ducks and pulled all the fat off, clarified it. And then I've been using it for probably like 8 or 9 years now. And I just reboil it, reclarify it, and then freeze it until I use it again. So every year I do turkey, confit turkey legs. And confit is basically just a very low temperature boil in fat. In this case, it's duck fat. It was intended originally to preserve meat for a long period of time in a cellar. But man, you boil anything in duck fat, and I'm going to tell you, it tastes really good. So the key is you got to be like right around 200 degrees, and it's got to be for like 8 hours. But then you have all these turkey legs, and turkey legs with the thigh on, they're like, that's a hunk and a half of meat. That's like, that's that's like 3 servings. So then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and save some with in the duck fat, but then whatever we're going to be eating that night for Thanksgiving, we'll just warm them up slowly and then hit broil. Throw some like paprika on the top and allow that kind of skin to just crust off. And then for me it's always Pinot Noir. It's one of the Belle Glos Pinots, but I like that paprika kick. It's not too much of a kick, but it's got a little smokiness. So typically I go with either Clark and Telephone with that kind of spice-driven character, or Las Alturas because it's got a little more of a little more power to it.
So just to be clear, when is my invite going to arrive? I mean, I think airline flights are still pretty cheap. I can just swing on out there, hang out for Thanksgiving, right? It's gonna be great.
Come on out on Wednesday.
That sounds awesome.
Hey, but I got to tell everybody out there, if you don't want the hassle of making turkey that day, like you can make turkey leg confit like 5 days, 10 days in advance, no problem. And then just bring it to a party if you're not having it, if you're not hosting it, and warm it up. And everybody's like, "You're a god. How'd you do this?" And you're like, "Well, actually, I just threw a bunch of meat in boiling fat, and then I broiled it in a day."
Man, you're like the Martha Stewart of the wine world. See, look, we're talking about wine, and we're giving you cooking tips for Thanksgiving. Look, this is great.
I just haven't gone to prison yet.
Well, yeah, that's true. We'll try to keep that one. We'll try to keep that one intact, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna take a quick break.
I'm doing everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, good idea. Me too. Well, we're gonna take a quick break. We got another little quick video here, and we're gonna come back and we're gonna dive into the Belle Glos. So go ahead and pull it out of the fridge if you haven't already. We'll be back in about 90 seconds.
Cheers.
Hi, I'm Joe Wagner, owner and winemaker of Belle Glos Wines. At Belle Glos, we focus on vineyard-designated Pinot Noirs from throughout California's best coastal regions. What I love most about Pinot Noir is its ability to transcend the site where the grapes were grown. It takes the soil and climate and brings those into the wine and showcases them better than any other variety. Of all the vineyards we farm for Belle Glos, the powerhouse is Las Alturas Vineyard in Santa Lucia Highlands. It is what we consider the cab drinker's Pinot. This appellation is nestled in the western edge of the Salinas Valley, at the bottom of the Sierra de Salinas, which is the mountain range separating the Salinas Valley from the Pacific Ocean. These mountains are integral to create the climate that Santa Lucia Highlands has, taking those Pacific weather patterns and skirting them off to the north, making it a very dry appellation, but again, very cool. So what effect do these climatic elements have on the grapes and the wine? First off, it creates much thicker skins and smaller berries, meaning we have a better skin-to-juice ratio, giving us the foundation for a much more opulent and robust style of Pinot Noir. Las Alturas means the heights or the heavens. It is a name I gave the vineyard because of its location within the Santa Lucia Highlands. This vineyard stretches up to 1,300 feet in elevation, resting above the morning fog layer and more in the sun and wind channel, creating an even more opulent style of Pinot Noir. What you should expect out of the Las Alturas Pinot Noir is a very voluptuous mouthfeel, a massive style of Pinot Noir with quite a bit of structure. This Pinot will pair well with anything from heavy pasta dishes all the way up to a barbecued steak. This is what we consider our cab drinker's Pinot. So get out there and enjoy some fun pairings, and thank you.
All
All
right.
right.
So we are back with Belle Glos, and we've got the Las Alturas specific vineyard, right? That's variety. So when we kind of dive into this, this is the Belle Glos brand, Joe. This is grandma's wine, right? Is it
Exactly. Yes. So named this
inspired by your
after
grandma?
named is after my grandmother, Lorna Belle Glos. She was one of the co-founders of Camus. She was a lover of Pinot Noir, and she was a huge inspiration to me. My office was actually her garage. She lived on the Camus property, so my office was her garage up until 2014. Saw her every day. I mean, it was literally I walked out the door and into her kitchen, and asked her if we could use her name, and she kind of, I don't know. Why would you want to ruin a wine like that? And she's a very, very humble woman, and she allowed us to. And years later, she I think was very happy to see that her family name was spread throughout the country. Her family's history as well, which they were also involved in wine pre-prohibition. So very cool story. Very happy and proud to be able to carry on her legacy. She lived a great life. Started as a farm girl and ended up still a farm girl really, but being able to enjoy her life a bit, especially in her later years. So she lived to the age of 98 years old, and drank wine just about every day that I ever saw her. Didn't ever overindulge. Never saw her. I saw my grandfather overindulge a few times, but not her. And just a little bit of lunch, a little bit at dinner, and was just a very happy person, and really, really proud to be able to carry on that legacy.
So grandpa was a little bit of breakfast, a little bit of lunch, a little bit of dinner, a little bit of dessert, right? No, I'm just kidding.
When he got into the Goldschlager, you knew something was going to happen.
Hey, it's party time, right? So as we dive into this, we look at this. What should our viewers be kind of picking up in terms of a difference between the Boeing Pinot Noir and this Belle Glos?
So, I hope you guys have been able to pour this. I hope you didn't have any trouble getting the wax off. If you did, please comment. And I'll say I'm sorry.
That's all you get.
So the difference here. So as we jump from Bowen, Russian River, let's just talk about the Appellations for a moment. To Santa Lucia Highlands, there's about 150 miles as the crow flies from Russian River down to Santa Lucia Highlands. The Russian River is very much in kind of more alluvial deposits, right? It's more just based off of soil deposits over thousands of years. When you look at Las Alturas, this is much more of a marine-based soil that has come up to above sea level due to plate tectonics and these plates pushing together. So that's where this comes from. So rather than having kind of a clay, gravelly loam with Russian River, we have something more like a sandy loam. But there's also quite a bit of like gypsum and more like calcareous soils down at Las Alturas Vineyard. Now, the difference with the climates, we talked a bit about the climate here with the fog. The Santa Lucia Highlands may be the most unique climate of anywhere that we farm, any of the grapes we farm. And it is located in an area of the Salinas Valley. If you've ever heard of Salinas Valley, it's also known as the lettuce bowl of America. So tons of lettuce grows there. It's a great winter crop location all year round. So the whole valley floor is full of row crops. But you get up into what we call the kidney, or like the low slope of the mountain range. So move to the west. There's a large mountain range called the Sierra de Salinas. And it's right at the foot slope of the Sierra de Salinas and where the valley floor begins. So it's a very narrow but long appellation, stretching somewhere around 15 miles. But it's one of the smallest appellations that we have in the state. But what happens is that mountain range, as the Pacific weather patterns come and make landfall, they hit that mountain range and skirt off to the north, where they hit places like Monterey, Pebble Beach, Santa Cruz, but they don't drop any precipitation in the Salinas Valley. So while we have very little water there, we have a lot of groundwater, very little water coming in the form of rain. So it's what we consider an arid climate, a desert more or less. What's interesting about that is that the temperatures on average are very cool, because we have the mouth of the bay right there, and literally you'll see just this line of weather moving north, but nothing is dropping, no rain is dropping in the Salinas Valley. So you'll see that we'll have a very cool influence from the coast coming in, pulling in, but then also a ton of sunlight. So not as much fog as we would have in Russian River Valley. Now, we also have a lot of wind that comes up in the afternoon. So add all these elements together, and what we've seen with Santa Lucia Highlands is that you have, due to the wind and amount of sunlight, and well, I'll start with those, you have much thicker skins on the grapes, meaning there's more color and more phenolic concentration. So there's number one. The cool weather keeps the acidity high. So we have a good balanced wine. So if you're out of balance, you're going to have either low acidity and low structure, and it's going to be flabby, kind of like porty. So we don't want that. So we need good acidity in this wine, and that's what that cool weather does for us. So it's kind of a very polar opposite elements at play within the Santa Lucia Highlands, making it, I think, one of the best areas to grow grapes, one of the most consistent that I've seen. So if you're just going to blindly pick a brand off of a wine list or off of a shelf, I would look for the Santa Lucia Highlands as what you may find as one of your best bets to find high quality Pinot Noir. Not just Belle Glos, I'm saying any producers down there. Everybody's focused on creating one of the most world-class regions for Pinot Noir. So love the appellation. The Los Alturas vineyards in particular is located in the southern portion of that appellation. Los Alturas means the heights, which at about 1,400 feet elevation for us, it's all really comparative, right? So the appellation starts maybe 400 feet. So getting up to those higher elevations, we see those bigger swings from daytime highs to nighttime lows. We have more sunlight. And moving south in the valley, we're a little bit warmer. So we get a bit of a richer, riper style. So the name, the Heights or the Heavens, is what we named this vineyard. And it's been a great vineyard for us. Planted this originally around, 2001. Made some experimental vintages. And then finally it became one of our vineyard designates.
That's awesome. So as a farmer yourself at heart and a winemaker at heart, I would imagine the experience of being in the vineyard, walking through the rows and kind of, examining the canopy and those various elements of just the presence of that place means a lot to you. When you go into Los Alturas or some of these other specific vineyards that you kind of have a major hand in, what does that feel like? Kind of help us understand what it's like to walk through there and what you're looking for and kind of the feeling inside you almost.
It's a seasonal thing, right? So, and I enjoy every one of the seasons. So first you have your bud break and you're going out to assess that. You're counting the amount of shoots you have per vine, how many doubles you have, how many clusters in kind of baby form, just in development you have per shoot. So you're doing all these, kind of analytical assessments to kind of just have a baseline so you can track all that stuff through the year. But seeing the growth and then going back there maybe 2 weeks later and seeing that you may be in bloom, and then 2 weeks later and you start seeing berry sizing and then veraison after that and all this stuff. Just the process of it is really one of the things I enjoy the most, being a part of it and being amongst the vines. And I also think that, the more you interact with vineyards, it's not like I'm not going to get all hippy dippy on this stuff, but what I'm saying is that good farming is just being involved in your vineyards. So knowing what they need, assessing them, looking at them, and reacting to it. Oftentimes it becomes more of just a scheduled element, right? So it's like we have a spray program. We do this every 2 weeks, this every 2 weeks, this every 2 weeks. And it's not necessarily needed, and it's not necessarily going to benefit the grapes. Oftentimes it can actually be a detriment to the grapes. So if you can actually go out there and see what you need, rather than just going with kind of a very, cut and dry approach, I think you're going to be doing what's best for the vine. So I do love walking the vineyards. I do love seeing the development from, ripping the soil, adding compost to the soil, planting the vines, developing the trellis, all the design work, and even irrigation. All that stuff plays a role, and all of it is, quite a joy to do.
So, like I said, we asked the tough questions. Bob Woodward ain't got nothing on us. So when we played that kind of that card a little bit ago with the Belle Glos kind of bottle shot, at the bottom there was a rating that said 96. Without naming names, you ever see any ratings where you just want to throw the bottle up against the wall? Like, do those drive you crazy sometimes, or do you really kind of embrace it and look for that feedback?
I actually come from a place in my lifetime where I started and where we're at now. The rating scales they're subjective, like anything else, right? That's one person's opinion. And that's what I don't like about ratings. Do I like a 96 or a 92 or a 100? Of course, that's great that somebody enjoyed the wine. But I always encourage consumers out there, just go out there and find the wines that you like. And once you find a vein, just keep on running down that vein and exploring something like that. So that's how I enjoy wine. And with the advent of some of these crowdsourced kind of critics, right, or crowdsourced sites, you can find some, I think, decent ratings. Just like you use Yelp. So if you are looking up Belle Glos or something, and you see that there's 5,000 ratings and it's 4.5 stars. I mean, in my mind, that's 5,000 ratings for a restaurant at 4.5 stars. That's got to be a good place. But then you may see something that you've never heard of and it's got 3 ratings and it's 4 stars. And you're like, oh, that's a bit of a risk. So I do think that there's some value to that kind of crowdsourced element where people can learn about wines and just in general what people like. But still, at the end of the day, wine is very subjective. And you got to explore it for yourself. And like I said earlier, it is a vast world to explore, and it's something you can do every night. And even bedtime reading could be about a region that you fell in love with one of the wines from, and it's just something interesting. And there's so much history behind it, so much culture associated with it, and those are parts that I think that really separate wine from the other products out there. I mean, what product can you think of that you're capturing a location and a period of time, and you could hold on to that for decades and enjoy it and reflect back upon it? I can't think of any other products that can do that.
So, one of the things in your video, the intro video, and kind of one of y'all's mottos or kind of, pillars is go with your palate, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
So in your evolution as a winemaker, it sounds like you kind of really embraced Pinot Noir early, and it sounds like you still embrace that, but you're branching out. You've got a Zinfandel line, and you're doing some cabs, and you've got some bubbly going on. Have you experienced your palate changing over time? Because I know the arc of the normal consumer or the average consumer, it changes, and when you might start with an Arbor Mist and move to a White Zin and then kind of creep on in. Have you experienced that yourself in your life? Obviously, coming from the family you're in.
I think me and
Pinot Noir a little bit.
I think me and the team here, I think we all share the same belief that we can always make a better wine. Even if we have a wine that we're like, man, that nailed every element that we wanted, that tastes so damn good. We always know that it could probably be better, and we always strive to make it better. Our motto or mantra is go with your palate. And while I'm kind of bagging a bit on critics and sommeliers that it is one man's opinion, one woman's opinion of a wine. A lot of that, I think, stems from when I started in the industry. The first few vintages of Belle Glos never broke a score of 80. They were all sub 80. They were set in the 70s. And I think a part of that was that they were so different. We weren't trying to emulate Burgundy. We weren't trying to emulate the old world, where I think everybody was still trying to emulate Burgundy. And we decided to take a different approach and say, Santa Lucia Highlands, this area has a terroir all its own. If we're picking it at a low level of sugar just to be close to what Burgundy has for acidity and for total alcohol, then we're kind of bastardizing what the potential greatness is of this appellation. So we took a very different track, and I think that it was a bit of a shock. I could just imagine you're tasting a number of Pinot Noirs, and a lot of them may be very light in color, very light in structure. But then you come across, Belle Glos Las Alturas, and it's this monster of a Pinot Noir. We call this the cab drinker's Pinot for a reason. And it's going to just either be something that is so impactful on your palate that you're like, that's different, but it's amazing. Or it's going to be, that's different and it's totally out of the norm, and I'm gonna give it a poor rating. So we didn't have the help from the critics back in the day, and that really set my tone for empowering people, because I wasn't going to change my tune of how we made our wines and grew our grapes just to appease critics. I felt that what we were doing was making the best wines, and we were going to continue on that track. And that's where the Meiomi philosophy actually came up, where it was about getting wines into people's mouths. Really, it was a by the glass program. It was driven like that for 8 to 9 years, where you couldn't find it at retail really, and that was really just to expose coastal California Pinot Noir to the American audience, and it did a great job of doing that. And I think it also did a great job of expressing a different type of Pinot Noir that people could enjoy. And at some point, I think the critics had to come around and realize, okay, not everything needs to try to taste like Burgundy. It can taste like its own thing, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. So the Las Alturas vineyard and some of the other vineyards in the Belle Glos series, were you kind of farming grapes from there before you went all in on those, or was it kind of a natural progression where you bought them and then realized that was really an awesome source of grapes?
No, we actually, so we planted this with the hope and intention of it becoming a Belle Glos wine. And it was all to be used just by Belle Glos, just for us. We have sold some fruit to a friend of mine named Mac McDonald, who owns a winery called Vision Cellars. And he's a great guy, great winemaker. And we became close, and he's making a little bit of that. So but generally speaking, no, we don't allow people to use, purchase the fruit from us. We like to keep it all in-house whenever possible.
Awesome. So what's next for Copper Cane? I mean, like I said, we've expanded to some additional brands, and you said you're constantly experimenting. What is the future? But you don't want to get too big, and I understand that. I mean, that's kind of the world is constantly progressing.
Yeah.
What's next for you guys?
We're going to continue doing what we're doing with these wines that we have. We have a few little side projects and maybe coming out in the next, year or two. We also have been dabbling in spirits starting in 2013. We've not released anything yet. So patience is a virtue, right? But I'll tell you, my finance guy hates it because we just keep putting money into it. But overall, I felt like with that, it was the right thing to do. I didn't want to just bring an early aged product to market that was just to make cash flow. We didn't need to do that, fortunately, and so wanted to do everything right. So we're making a number of different whiskeys and a few brandies that are actually going to be coming out probably next spring, late next spring, early summer. So that's it. Starting with the 2013 year, so we're going to be 5 years plus on some of the brown spirits there. So that's an exciting thing for us, and a lot of the stuff we've learned over time, and not just barrel use, but also fermentation, has evolved and adapted into the spirit side. So that'll be something fun we're doing that's completely new for us. But on the wine side, we're not looking to expand greatly. We're looking to just continue to make great wines and provide them for the public out there. We have a great balance of retail and restaurants, so that people can find us and also experience our wines. Maybe by the glass at a restaurant, and then they're walking through the store and just thinking, Tuesday night dinner, what am I going to do? And they go, hey, I know Boeing. I tasted that the other night, and pick up a bottle. So it's really just about balance and kind of a slow road to continued success. One of the philosophies I had when we first started Copper Cane was I didn't want to be so big that I wasn't involved in all the products we produce. And then I also wanted to make sure I knew everybody personally. And that's something that we hold to this day. And that's something that will probably be a barrier to our growth at some point. But we're in a family business. And if it doesn't feel like a family business, it can be owned and operated by a family. But if it doesn't have the culture of one, it's not a family business.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. I think we have a question from someone that's watching live. So let's see. Can you talk about the differences in the taste profile of the Belle Glos family of wines? So between the Las Alturas and the kind of the Clark and Telephone and the Dairyman, what will we see in terms of a difference between those?
So we're kind of starting at the top here with the Las Alturas. This is the biggest boy of the bunch. So because of those, really the climate more than anything in Santa Lucia Highlands. So I'll give you a quick kind of what I generally expect from these wines. So Las Alturas is going to be earthy, very structured, big, immense. You're going to feel it on your palate, like not the tannin, but just the weight of it. Like it envelops every aspect of the palate. Fruit tones are going to be a little more on the riper side, even like a pie filling element to it. And those are some of the pieces we look for. As you move to the south of Los Alturas, another 150 miles to Clark and Telephone, that's our kind of baking spice driver, right? We got cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, having a bit of a brighter fruit tone like strawberry or raspberry. But really the spice is the highlight there. Very soft, very velvety style of Pinot Noir, but very lush, as you'd expect from, similar to the two Pinot Noirs you've tasted here. Running back up to the Dairyman Vineyard, now 300 miles north of Clark and Telephone. So they're kind of equidistant to each other. Dairyman Vineyard is kind of what I'd consider classic Russian River, but on steroids. So you got this kind of Bing cherry element, some minerality to it, and even like a bit of, and I mean this in a positive way, like a menthol tea, which I like to taste. So it's kind of got these, unique elements. And early on in like the aging life of Dairyman, we like to see it taste like cherry Robitussin. I know that's an odd thing to refer to, but that kind of evolves into
Brings
something.
Up childhood memories.
Yeah, exactly. The first time I got drunk, but
the cup was this big. Yeah.
So that does evolve into this more herbal natured character, but having this great like Bing cherry sort of backbone. So that's in summary kind of what I see from the three Belle Glos wines. And we have a few others that are smaller in scale, but those are really the three that you'll see and the ones that we have really worked with the longest and know the best.
So your relationship with your dad, I mean, y'all still obviously, get along and kind of bounce ideas off each other, I'm sure. What are his takes on some of your products, the Belle Glos and the Boeing, and you got a little friendly rivalry going on?
I'd say it is a friendly rivalry. We try not to tread on each other's, it's not just the whatever it is, Pinot Noir, the product, right, or Chardonnay, but also the price point. So we want to make sure that we're kind of taking different avenues. And there's really only so much you can do. But we share some secrets, as many as we can, both kind of from a sales marketing standpoint, but also from a grape growing and winemaking standpoint. So both he and my brother were over at my house over the weekend. And we're bullshitting about, trying to figure out what to do towards the end of the year to make sure we can move some, stuff around to try to, offload some of our potential death tax, right? So stuff like that. So it kind of runs the gamut of stuff. It's hilarious, but they're all kind of, trade secrets and whatever else. And, but they're still making great wines. I'd say it's somewhat friendly competition, but more about, just trying to do more to bring more family back into the wine industry.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think we have a couple more questions from viewers. If you've got a little more time, Joe, is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
So Scott's asking, what temperature do you store your wines? And should we do the same at home?
So temperature. So we're in the cellar right now. The temperature in here is about 55 degrees. I love that temperature for wine. I think it's a great, or especially for reds, I think it's a great starting point. So if you got a little wine fridge or something, or if you're holding them in the closet and you toss them in the freezer or an ice bucket, as you mentioned earlier, those things do help out. So I prefer 55 to 58, somewhere in there. Whites, store them at cellar temperature is fine. I like them, straight out of the ice bucket, as chilled as possible. Same thing with champagne. There's a few exceptions, but typically that's how I like my whites and champagnes.
All right. I think we have another question. Let's see if we can throw that up here on the screen. Andy says, what kind of cheese would you recommend with the Belle Glos for our Thanksgiving spread? And I'm assuming we'll go with the Los Alturas on this one.
Let's go with the Los Alturas. Let's see. I think this is more than just like cheese. This is like a dish if you want to bring it to somebody's house. It sounds really simple, but it's like amazing. So goat cheese. Just if you can get like a small wheel of goat cheese. It's usually in like plastic, and you just gotta pop it out, and then drizzle it with grapeseed oil, and then take some large flaked salt, like that Himalayan salt or some of that Black Sea salt. And I mean, just cover the whole thing with that. Bring some crackers or some sliced like sourdough baguette. And it is one of the best experiences. with something like Las Alturas, where you get that kind of acid punch from the cheese itself, where goat cheese kind of has that, but the saltiness as well just makes you salivate. And something that's soft yet massive, meaning low tannin but high phenolic, like Las Alturas, I think goes great with something like that.
I don't know if you hear that, but that's the sound of me booking a flight to seriously. I'm coming to your Thanksgiving. That sounds amazing.
That is like one of the easiest things to do. And I swear, every time it's like a crowd pleaser. People like just love it. I mean, I'll eat it with a spoon. It's so damn good.
Yeah. Well, and shameless plug here. Lowe's Foods, we've got our cheese islands and our cheese department in every one of our Lowe's Food stores with an amazing array of cheeses, including plenty of goat cheeses. So we can absolutely hook you up with that. Again, people come to us for the hard-hitting questions. We are top-notch wine and food and beverage news, reporters here. The New York Times has nothing on us. And so the question that everyone wants to know, Joe, before we let you go, when Thanksgiving comes and you're getting together with your family, what are we drinking? Well, are we drinking Camus? Are we drinking Belle Glos? What are we drinking?
We usually all bring just like a myriad of stuff. But, one thing that's fun to do, especially when you got family in the wine business, is you pour one of their wines into somebody else's bottle and put a cork and capsule on it. And I'm not kidding. I've done this.
That sounds like stolen valor. I feel like I saw a documentary about somebody doing that illegally one time. I'm gonna report you.
There was one time where I just couldn't even bring myself to tell the truth, and it's still a lie to this day. It was like just based on what you said, I don't want you to feel horrible. So it is a blast. If somebody's got a favorite wine, just go ahead and bring it. And actually, one time at a school function for the kids, I took a bottle of my. I took a bottle of my.
Every great story starts, right? One time at a school function.
Exactly. So our schools in Napa Valley, there's always like a wine table in the back, right? And so all the parents are like going back and forth, whatever, for a Christmas program or something. And so I took a bottle. My brother makes Marseillais Chardonnay, and I took a bottle of Marseillais that was empty, and I filled it with like añejo tequila, and just put it on the back table. And I just kept looking back to see who it was. And the deacon of the church kept going back to that bottle and drinking it. They're like over and over again. I was like, he either knows or he just likes tequila a lot.
Yeah. He's in on it. He's thrilled. He's like, this is the best school function I've ever been to.
Nobody knows awesome. This is actually 1942.
That's awesome. Well, Joe, I really, truly appreciate your time. We've got to wrap up here. We're running out of time to chat, but this has been wonderful. Thank you for the candidness. Listen, when we do this again here before long, we're going to be drinking copper cane spirits and Argentinian Melback from those barrels right behind you. We're going to just like sample them out of the barrel ourselves, right? That's what I was told. That sounds good.
Plug them straight through the screen. Hey, right. Jordan, I want to thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I also want to say a few quick shout outs, if you don't mind, for people that I know that were involved in putting this together.
Absolutely.
Charles Slezak, thank you very much. John Fisher, and Ann Gooden and Tracy Grogan, Jennifer Santiago and Kelly Davis. I know that you guys put a lot into this. Very much appreciate it. And very, very excited to have been able to do this. So hope to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Everyone, stop by Lowe's Foods. Again, the deal on the 3 bottles, it's a killer deal. $75 for all 3 of these bottles. That's about a $50 savings. So that runs to the end of November. You flat out can't beat it. And as you're looking forward to Thanksgiving, you got to have wine for Thanksgiving. So sign up when the family kind of passes around the sheet to say who's bringing what. Sign up for the wine. Head to Lowe's Foods. We got you covered. Joe, thank you so much, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you to everybody at Lowe's. Thank you guys for supporting our wines. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. We will see you soon.
Go with your palate has been a family philosophy ever since they started in the wine industry.
My grandfather always believed that, regardless of if it's a $2 bottle of wine or a $200 bottle of wine, if you like that wine, then you should just drink it and enjoy it. Don't be too scared to jump in with both feet. We've learned more about making wine through screwing wine up than we have through our successes. And we want to make wines that we want to drink. First thing I like to notice about a wine is kind of just how it graces the palate. Just the weight, the way that it plays on your palate. Is it something I want another sip of? Is it something that's going to go well with food? It could be as simple as Zinfandel and a hamburger, or it could be something as fancy as Chia Pinot and a rosé. I have a palate that I think is reflective of my upbringing. I think that everybody else from time to time probably had Eggo waffles and raisin bran for breakfast. Knowing what you enjoy, experimenting with new things, once you get a good understanding of what your palate prefers, just stick with that.